Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Safety and Handling of Phosphate webinar. I'm Laura Robeson for Caris Corporation. A few notes before we get started today. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand after the live session. All attendees will receive a follow-up email after the webinar with the link to access the presentation. We encourage you to share this with your organization and network. If you are interested in receiving a PDF of today's presentation, please contact us directly. To ensure the best audio quality, we have everyone in listen-only mode. If you have questions, please submit them throughout the presentation using the question pane in the GoToWebinar panel. We will be taking questions at the end as time permits. Here is a quick look at our upcoming 2017 webinars. On May 11th, Dr. Pamela Dugan, our Business Development Program Manager, will present Elimination of Hydrogen Sulfide Odors with Carox CR tablets. To register, please visit our website. The recordings of our webinars are available at cariscorporation.com following each webinar. Earlier this year, we hosted Safety and Handling of Permanganate, which is also available for viewing on our website. Here are a few ways to find us. You can visit our website for product and technical information, webinar links, webinar schedules, and more. Listed are the general sales and marketing email addresses, as well as mine. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Google+, Facebook, and Twitter, where we frequently post technical articles, upcoming events we are attending, webinar schedules, as well as recordings and more. At this time, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our speaker, Mr. Darren Scutt. Darren Scutt has worked for Caris Corporation for 16 years, with the last 2 years as the Technical Service Manager. As the Technical Service Manager, Darren conducts laboratory testing and product demonstrations for Caris Corporation, municipal, industrial, and environmental customers, and prospective new customers. These product demonstrations include technical training, safety presentations, and installation of safe chemical handling and dosing systems. He is a graduate from Illinois Wesleyan University, Bloomington, Illinois, with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Chemistry, ACS certified. Mr. Scutt is a member of AWWA, Water Environment Federation, and the American Chemical Society. We welcome Mr. Darren Scutt.
Thank you. Today we're going to talk about phosphates in drinking water treatment and specifically about safety. To give you a little bit of background about phosphates, there's two main components where they're used in drinking water treatment. The first is corrosion control, which would be the product brands orthophosphates, zinc orthophosphates, and blended phosphates, and then also used for sequestration, which would be blended phosphates or polyphosphates. In 2001, a study by AWWA said that 56% of all water utilities use some type of phosphate-based products in their treatment scheme. Phosphates are used, like I said, for corrosion control and sequestration. So definitely when we talk about corrosion control, you think of lead and copper control in the consumer's home. The other applications for sequestration are calcium carbonate scale control and iron and manganese sequestration, so you don't get precipitation out in the distribution system. One of the things I always like to talk to consumers when we talk about product safety is that phosphates are actually something that we come into contact with on a daily basis. Phosphates are used as a food additive, as a leavening agent in breads and donuts. They're a dairy emulsifier in cheese, and they're also contained in the can of soda that you drink as beverages as phosphoric acid. You also will come in contact in them in toothpaste, as plaque inhibitors and whitening agents, and in drug manufacture. And then if you fertilize your grass or you're a farmer and fertilize your field, phosphates are a major component of that. You also will see some phosphate products as cleaners and detergents. So phosphates are something that we come into contact with on a daily basis. Our intention is to provide a broad overview of important safety issues and explain how global harmonization requirements have impacted phosphate products. Chemical safety is a complex topic with many components. A webinar should address a variety of important topics ranging from regulatory standards, worker exposure, chemical reactivity, disposal of wastes, and ultimately to the disposal of the empty packages. I will cover as many of these topics as I can in the presentation, but remember that we have many safety experts on staff who stay up to date on the newest information. They can always be consulted at any time after the completion of this webinar. By way of introduction, I'd like you to know that Caris Corporation is a member of the American Chemistry Council, ACC, and as a member we participate in the ACC's Responsible Care Initiative. There are several important principles that form the program, but none more important than to protect the safety of our workplace staff and of our customers. Today's program is one part of our ongoing customer safety communication effort. In regards to safety, this presentation is split into two major product categories. The first part will be orthophosphates and zinc orthophosphates, and the second half will be pH-adjusted orthophosphates and blended phosphates and polyphosphates. Orthophosphates and zinc orthophosphate products are part of a broad chemical category identified as corrosion control chemicals. The low pH of these products, along with the zinc content, drive the rules that govern safe storage, transport, handling, and disposal of these products. Orthophosphate and zinc orthophosphate products are manufactured, packaged, and delivered in two major forms that you see in the pictures: dry powders or concentrated liquids. They are similar in that the active ingredient, which is orthophosphate and zinc, is the same regardless of the physical form of the product. However, they are different in the concentration of this active ingredient, varying from nearly 60% as dry product to 40% to as little as 10% in liquid solution. These changes in form and concentration will drive the associated cautions about safe handling and use. For Caris products, the dry powders would be Caris 3050, 3150, 3250, and 3350. These are all zinc phosphate products. For concentrated liquids, we would have Caris 3080, 3090, and anything in the 3000 series would be a zinc orthophosphate-based product. 4100, 4105 are orthophosphate products that contain no zinc components. Communicating the potential hazards and precautionary actions, specific worker protections, and remediation options is accomplished through a variety of methods. In addition to webinars such as this one, the common routes are shown here: safety data sheets, chemical safety reports, package labels, pictograms, and warning placards. As our understanding of product application evolves or as regulations change, these communications routes may also be reformatted or revised. This brings us to the Global Harmonized System, GHS, for hazard communication. Today there is a drive for consistency in the way information is delivered worldwide. The safety data sheet, the SDS, is still our most important safety literature piece. As of June of last year, the GHS compliant safety data sheet replaces the previous material safety data sheet that you're familiar with. This switch to a new name signals that there have been changes. For example, there is a new 16-section format, although our old MSDS also had that same 16-part format. Of special note that you'll see on the SDS, new red, black, and white pictograms are part of the new format as well. A safety data sheet is available for each of our phosphate products. Remember that when it is stored and handled properly, it is stable and safe to use. Here are the new health hazard pictograms that are required for zinc orthophosphate products. These pictograms apply to all package sizes. The health and safety categories are also new, and they are based on the latest research data. If you'd like to know more detail about the category definitions, the OSHA.gov website will provide all the appropriate tables. The pictograms that you will see are for corrosive products in the symbol, and then systemic. Those health hazards break down to skin corrosion, irritation, serious eye damage/irritation, and then the two for systemic are specific target organ toxicity and specific target organ repeated. In addition to the new pictograms that you'll see on the SDSs, phosphate label requirements include the following: name, address, and telephone number of the manufacturer, a product identifier, and then the new categories you'll see are signal words, hazard statements, precautionary statements, and then some supplementary information. If signal words are required, there are only two to choose from, warning or danger. The signal word for zinc orthophosphates and orthophosphate products is danger. This is the new hazard statement for these products. It reflects the potential health hazards as well as the chemistry of phosphate. For example, it identifies the corrosive potential, causes severe burns and eye damage, may cause respiratory irritation, causes damage to organs, lungs through prolonged or repeated exposure, very toxic to aquatic life with long-lasting effects. These are the new phosphate precautionary statements. The wording is specific to the phosphate and linked to the physical hazard associated with them. Each of these categories, prevention, response, storage, and disposal, relate to the specific product that you are handling. For prevention, it talks about not to breathe the mist or vapor, wear protective gloves, clothing, eye protection, face protection, and avoid a release to the environment. It also talks about responses if you come into contact. If you were to swallow it, rinse the mouth, do not induce vomiting. If you were to get the product on your skin or your hair, take off contaminated clothing, rinse skin with water shower, wash the contaminated clothes before use. Storage, store locked up. Disposal, dispose of contents or containers in accordance with local, regional, national, and international regulations. This is the only environmental hazard that applies to phosphate. Because phosphate's environmental impact is related to the quantity of material that may be released, this pictogram applies only to large packages. It is hazardous to the aquatic environment, acute category 1, and hazardous to the aquatic environment, long-term hazard, category 1. Lastly, this is the new GHS pictogram that reflects the corrosive nature of phosphate. The physical hazard criteria are available if you want to see more detail, corrosive to metals, and the pictogram you see. Now let's transition to the important discussion of worker protection. The safety data sheet still contains recommendations for personal protective equipment. By following these recommendations, exposure is minimized or eliminated. Health hazards are negated. Let's look at these in detail. The inhalation exposure scenarios for phosphate products, for the most part, apply only to the dry powders versus the liquids. When transferring the material from its package into a storage hopper, a fine dust can be released. Phosphate dust is considered an irritant, and breathing it should be avoided. It may be possible, however, to imagine a situation where a fine mist of liquid phosphate is generated and a worker may be exposed. This would be rare, but could occur if a line under pressure has a small cutter leak and mists the product into the air. The approved safety equipment would be a NIOSH MSHS approved dust or mist respirator is recommended if these are concerns for the product you're handling. It is the customer's duty to determine risk of dust or mist in its application and to protect against that risk when handling the product. The eyes are very sensitive tissue and must be protected from phosphate dust particles and liquid droplets. Dry phosphate crystals are sharp and abrasive and can scratch the eye surface. Plus, the crystals are acidic and will produce a corrosive burn. Eye protection is very important in that case. I would specifically mention that safety glasses with side shields are acceptable when handling dry phosphate products, but our most recent recommendation is to use goggles when handling concentrated liquid phosphates or face shields. In the case there, the liquid can go around the safety glasses and side shields and get in the eyes, so hence the reason to switch to splash goggles or a face shield. Because of their corrosive nature, gloves and a protective apron should be worn when handling phosphate products. Contact with the concentrated solutions or powders could damage the skin. In addition to your normal work clothing covering arms, the plastic gloves and apron provide an additional barrier between you and the phosphate product itself. As with all chemicals, concentrated phosphate products should not be ingested. So please do not eat or drink phosphate or any other chemical. After handling the phosphate product, always wash your hands before eating, drinking, or smoking. If the phosphate product is swallowed, it can cause severe burns to the mouth, throat, esophagus, and stomach due to its low pH. If ingestion of the phosphate occurs, immediately rinse them out and drink plenty of water. Never give anything by mouth to a victim that is unconscious or is having convulsions. Do not induce vomiting. If vomiting occurs, keep head low so that stomach content doesn't get into lungs. Get medical attention immediately. Please refer to Section 4 of the SDS for more information. I now want to discuss how to properly store phosphate products and the potential hazardous conditions that you should be aware of. Phosphate products are manufactured and packaged in containers made of compatible materials. When phosphate is repackaged into smaller container sizes, the proper container manners must be used. Under normal conditions, phosphates are very stable and have a shelf life of many months. Cautionary statements regarding proper storage reflect the concerns of accidental leakage or spills from the original packaging mixing with incompatible materials on the warehouse floor or in the drainage system. In a warehouse, be aware that lift forks may puncture a phosphate package. Phosphate that leaks from a damaged container can react with other materials on the warehouse floor. Like stated, phosphate products are stable under normal conditions. You do not want to expose them to extreme temperatures, as high temperature heat will actually revert the polyphosphate to orthophosphate. You don't want to store next to strong caustids, most metals, oxidizers, solutions containing bleach or ammonia. The reaction between those can liberate chlorine gas, especially with the acids. Take care to protect the containers from physical damage. And when involved in a fire, you may give off toxic fumes of phosphorus, zinc oxides, and depending on the zinc orthophosphate type product, hydrogen chloride or sulfur compounds. Please refer to Section 7 of the SDS for the specific phosphate product that you are using. A typical NFPA hazard code for an orthophosphate or a zinc orthophosphate would be 300. The health hazard means a 3 under fire conditions can give off irritating combustion products. Flammability hazard would generally be a 0, non-flammable, does not burn. Reactivity hazard would be normally stable, not reactive with water. If a fire occurs and phosphate is involved, large quantities of water, CO2, powder, or foam can be used as extinguishing agents. You want a berm to contain the water after you do this. Please refer to Section 5 of the SDS for more information on your specific product. In addition to the NFPA diamond, there is the HMIS hazard code, which stands for the Hazardous Materials Information System. This label is similar to the NFPA fire diamond, where the fire diamond is designed for emergencies when information on the short-term effects of exposure is needed. The HMIS color bar label is not for emergencies, but is used to provide health warning information. The categories would be the same: health hazard of a 3, flammability hazard of 0, reactivity hazard of 0, and then the extra category that is added on the HMIS hazard code is protective equipment. For most zinc orthophosphates and orthophosphates, the protective equipment listed would be E, safety glasses, gloves, and a dust respirator. If dry phosphate is spilled, you want to sweep up the material and transfer it to a clean metal drum. Do not return this spilled product to the original packaging if that container still contains phosphate that is not spilt on the floor. Floor sweepings could include reactive material that will contaminate or react with the phosphate in the drum. In addition, you also don't know what was on the floor that would get into your finished water if you were to use the product that had spilled. Please refer to Section 13 of the SDS for more information. For liquid phosphate spill content, the first thing you want to do is contain and isolate the liquid, collecting it in a pit or a holding area. You want to absorb it with inert media and dispose of properly. Do not flush this to the sewer. Avoid runoff into storm sewers and ditches that lead to waterways. Report to required agencies if the release to the environment is a circular reportable quantity. You can also neutralize the phosphate product if you have a small spill before disposal. Refer to Section 13 of the SDS for more information. If you are transporting or shipping phosphate products, U.S. Department of Transportation hazardous materials regulations are still in effect. When shipping phosphate, the proper package, labels, placards, and documents must be used. These documents would include identifying the hazardous materials, what the quantity limitations are, what the proper packaging should be, how that package is marked and labeled, what would be on the shipping certificates, and how you would placard the vehicle transporting that shipment. Although there are new GHS requirements, the US DOT still requires shipping documents that show the proper shipping name, the UN number, and any reportable quantity. This requirement may vary depending on the size of the package. For the dry phosphates, you would see the proper shipping name, corrosive solid, acidic, inorganic, NOS, with a UN number and a reportable quantity if it's a zinc product of 1,000 pounds. For the liquid products, the proper shipping name would be corrosive liquid, acidic, inorganic, and specifically in relation to phosphoric acid or a zinc orthophosphate that contains phosphoric acid, the reportable quantity is 5,000 pounds of that component. There are two U.S. acts that regulate the release of or disposal of phosphates into the environment. RCRA governs how hazardous waste may be disposed of, and phosphate falls under the corrosive toxicity designation. It may not be disposed of to a sanitary landfill. CERCLA, which governs Superfund sites, establishes reportable quantities. And that reportable quantity, depending on the product, 1,000 pounds for zinc-containing products and 5,000 pounds for phosphoric acids. Depending on your product, it could contain zinc chloride, zinc sulfate, and phosphoric acid, or any two of those or any one of those. And that'll determine the reportable quantity for a specific product, and that'll be listed on your SDS. To report a release to the environment, you'll want to contact the National Response Center, NRC, at the 800 number provided. Phosphates are considered corrosive waste for disposal, so disposal should be completed through a licensed disposal company. For small quantities, destroying the phosphate via neutralization could be a viable option for disposal. This would include a small spill on the ground. Remember to rinse the phosphate drums, the packaging, triple times to reduce the corrosivity, and then remove the label prior to proper recycling and disposal of the containers. Refer to Section 13 of the SDS for more information. The other major category of products are blended phosphate products, which would include ortho-poly blends and also polyphosphate products. These would also be separated into two categories, dry powders and concentrated liquids. They are similar in the active agreement, that is a combination of orthophosphates and polyphosphates or polyphosphates, and the hazards are the same regardless of the physical form. However, they are also very different based on the active ingredients, varying from nearly 90% active as dry powders to 40 to 10% as a liquid solution. These changes in forms drive the associated cautions. For dry powders, this would include KARES 2150, 2250, 2350, and 2450. For concentrated liquids, this would be KARES 4200, 4500, the 8000 series, and then any of the products in the Aquamag or CalciQuest product lines. Just like before with the zinc orthophosphates and the orthophosphate-based products, the safety communication would include safety data sheets, chemical safety reports, package labels, pictograms, and warning placards for this category of products. The safety data sheet is still our most important safety literature piece for these products as well. Of special note would be new red, black, and white pictograms that are parts of the new format. Typically, most products that fall into the blended phosphate and polyphosphate category will have no pictograms at all. The solid forms are stable under normal conditions, and liquid forms are stable under normal conditions but will have a shelf life of a year based on the polyphosphate reverting to orthophosphate over time. Please read and understand the safety data sheet and all the product labels relating to your specific product. Like I stated, there are no health hazard pictograms for most blended phosphate products or polyphosphate products. Phosphate label requirements are the same as well. You will see on the label the name, address, and telephone number and the product identifier, and then you would see signal words, hazard statements, and precautionary statements. With the change to a blended phosphate, there is no signal word for blended phosphate products, so you won't see danger or warning on that label. There will be none, along with no pictograms. For hazard statements on blended phosphates, the mixture does not meet the criteria for classification. It reflects the potential health hazards as well as the chemistry of these phosphate products. For precautionary statements for blended phosphate products, prevention would be just to observe good industrial hygiene practices. Response, wash hands after handling. Storage, store away from incompatible materials. And disposal would be dispose of the waste and residues in accordance with local authority and requirements. Phosphate environmental and physical hazards, there are none listed for the blended phosphate products. For worker protection and handling of blended phosphates, the safety data sheet makes recommendations for the personal protective equipment. By following these recommendations, exposure can be minimized or eliminated, and health hazard can be negated. We'll look at these in detail for the blended phosphates. Provide adequate ventilation. Airborne concentrations of the phosphate in forms of dust or mist may be irritating to the respiratory tract. A NIOSH MSS HS approved dust or mist respirator could be recommended depending on your handling situation. Like with zinc orthophosphates and orthophosphate-based products, it's the customer's duty to determine the risk of a dust or a mist in its application and to protect against that risk. In the case of blended phosphates, instead of splash goggles or a face shield, the PPE that would be required typically would be safety glasses with side shields, and then proper removal of that personal protective equipment is also important if you were to get splashed in the face with safety glasses with side shields on. You don't see the splash goggles or the face shield as a requirement because of the reduced hazard from the blended phosphate products. You want to avoid contact with phosphates or minimize your contact with it. In addition to normal work clothing and arms, wear protective gloves for prolonged or repeated exposure. What you'll notice also with blended phosphates is that we've removed the recommendation for having the apron as not a normal thing that you need to have. With the blended phosphates, the standard ingestion applies as well. Do not eat or drink phosphate or any chemical in a concentrated form. Please wash your hands before eating, drinking, or smoking if you've handled the dry phosphate products or the liquid phosphate products. If ingestion has occurred, immediately rinse mouth and drink plenty of water and get medical attention if symptoms occur. Please refer to Section 4 of the SDS. Phosphate storage requirements for blended phosphates. These products are stable under normal conditions. Do not expose to extreme temperatures. High heat will actually revert the polyphosphate in a blended phosphate to orthophosphate quicker. So storing them at normal room temperature would be the best application. Please take care to protect the containers from physical damage. Damage to the container can cause the phosphate product to leak onto the floor and may react with other things contained in the warehouse to cause issues. When involved in a fire, these materials may give off toxic fumes of phosphorus. Refer to Section 7 of the SDS for handling and storage information on your specific blended phosphate product. The NFPA hazard code for the blended phosphate products is typically going to be as follows: 100. For blended phosphate products, the 1 stands for under fire conditions, it can give off some irritating combustion products. Flammability hazard is 0, will not burn. Reactivity hazard is 0, normally stable, not reactive with water. And for the blended phosphate and polyphosphate products, you'll see a special hazard of none because they are not corrosive. For fire extinguishing, if a blended phosphate or a polyphosphate is involved in a fire, use large quantities of water, CO2, powder, or foam can all be used as extinguishing medium. In order to prevent the spread of the phosphate product, please burn to contain the water so that you can dispose of it properly. Refer to Section 5 of the SDS for your specific product for more information. Just like with zinc orthophosphates and orthophosphate-based products, the blended phosphate products have an HMIS hazard code, which is a take on the NFPA diamond. In this case, the NFPA diamond relates to the HMIS hazard code for the blended phosphates, where the health hazard category stays a 1, the flammability hazard is a 0, the reactivity hazard is a 0, and the protective equipment category is an E, which says safety glasses, gloves, and a dust respirator or mist respirator if required based on your specific application. For dry blended phosphate products and dry polyphosphate spill cleanup, you want to clean up immediately by sweeping or shoveling the spill on the floor. Do not return this to the original drum. Transfer to a clean drum and dispose of according to approved local regulations. Floor sweepings could include reactive material or other things that you do not want in your finished water, which is why you do not want to contaminate the original drum. Refer to Section 13 of the SDS for more information. Liquid phosphate spill cleanup. You want to contain or isolate the liquid, containing it in a pit or holding area. You could also burn it in place. Absorb with inert media and then dispose of properly. Refer to Section 13 of the SDS. Typically, liquid blended phosphates are already pH neutral, so they do not need to be neutralized, but refer to your specific product. Just like when you're transporting zinc orthophosphates and orthophosphate products, blended phosphates and polyphosphates also fall under the hazardous materials regulation. And this identifies what kind of packaging and limitations, labeling, and certificates that you need for those products. Specifically, blended phosphates and polyphosphate products are not regulated by the DOT. Blended phosphate products do not have a reportable quantity as well. What this means is these products can be transported in a normal vehicle and do not have to be in a placarded truck with shipping papers when making those deliveries. You can look at this DOT information on the specific phosphate product you're used. Disposal of product in containers for blended phosphates and polyphosphates. Disposal should be completed through a licensed disposal company. Packaging should be rinsed 3 times and the label removed prior to proper recycling or disposal of the container. Please refer to Section 13 of the SDS for your specific product.
Thank you, Darren. Good job. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and enter them now. On this screen, you'll see our North American regional sales territory map, and it also includes each sales manager with their phone number if you'd like to contact one of them. And our team located in Europe covers Europe, Middle East, and Asia, and can be reached by contacting one of the sales managers listed here. If you have any questions, you can reach Darren at the email or telephone number listed here. We also include John Bull, our Global Tech Program Manager, and our Senior EHS Manager, Shelley Corbin. You can also reach us at our CARES switchboard number. If you have any questions, please enter them now. The first question is, what types of materials should be used for equipment and storage of phosphate products?
So depending on the type product you're using is going to determine what type of materials that you should use. Typical is going to be the container that the product is shipped in is high-density polyethylene. So most products you can use high-density polyethylene for day tanks or bulk tanks. Typical plumbing is going to involve Schedule 80 PVC with glued fittings. You can go a more expensive route and use stainless steel tanks and fittings. Materials that you typically want to avoid are anything that are a base metal. So you wouldn't want to put the concentrated phosphate products through copper or brass fittings or anything like that, because the phosphate products will slowly dissolve those metals. At low concentrations, we think of phosphates as protecting those things, but at the concentrated 30%, 40% concentrations that we would have the liquids, those materials become incompatible because of that high concentration.
Okay. The next question, if you are diluting products before using them, are there safety concerns with that?
Just like the significant safety concerns between the two different types of phosphate products, the same thing would be if you're doing dilution. For blended phosphate products and polyphosphate products, diluting those products would be relatively easy. You can add the water, stir for 5 to 10 minutes, and the product is going to blend to the concentration that you desire. The difference being when you switch to zinc orthophosphates or orthophosphates with a pH of less than 1. The addition of water to dilute those products is going to generate a lot of heat. You can cause splashing and sizzling depending on which order that you add the acid to the water. So you'll want to have extra safety concerns there. Because of that heat generation, you may also, if you're diluting, want to change it to a container that is sturdier, has a thicker wall to it when you're doing that dilution. So you definitely want to have different safety considerations depending on the specific type of phosphate product that you're using.
Okay. What impact does phosphate use have on wastewater plants?
So we talked about disposal of the phosphate products. One of the issues with phosphate products, the reason why you wouldn't want to rinse them down the drain in your plant if you had a spill, you want to transfer them to a container and then dispose of properly, is all wastewater plants have a regulation on the amount of phosphorus that they can discharge to their river or stream. So you wouldn't want to send a large slug of phosphate that you rinse down the drain to them, because that'll impact the wastewater plant and them meeting that regulation. On the side where you actually feed it into the drinking water, you're at such a low level that it generally doesn't have a large impact on the level entering the plant. So it's really only a consideration for the impact on large spills of not impacting the wastewater plant by washing those down to sanitary or sewer or disposing them that way.
Okay, thank you. That looks like it's it for questions right now. If you have any further questions, please contact us and we will get back to you as soon as possible. I will email the link out for this webinar this afternoon, and thank you for joining us.